Hi there, I'm Professor Plague, and we're going to discuss how we can make Pokemon better. In this series, I'm going to teach you why some Pokemon aren't very good, what makes them unique, and how we can highlight those key features to make them better in the future. But before we begin, we need to lay down some ground rules. First, the Pokemon must not be very good competitively. Second, the Pokemon must not already have a Mega Evolution, Regional Variant, or Gigantamax form. And lastly, the Pokemon must not be inherently gimmicky. Today, we're looking at the Cobra Pokemon, Arbok. First, we'll look at its Pokedex entries. Transfixing prey with a face-like pattern on its belly, it binds and poisons the frightened victim. This Pokemon is terrifically strong in order to constrict things with its body. It can even flatten steel oil drums. Once Arbok wraps its body around its foe, escaping its crunching embrace is impossible. With a very vengeful nature, it won't give up the chase, no matter how far, once it targets its prey. So, we can see that this Pokemon chases, binds, and poisons its prey so that they cannot escape. Arbok is a mono-poison type Pokemon. Poison Pokemon are weak to Psychic and Ground type moves, but they resist Fighting, Poison, Bug, Grass, and Fairy type moves. Because of this large pool of defenses, and an immunity to being poisoned, Poison is considered one of the best defensive types in the game. Unfortunately, it is one of the worst types for offense, being super effective against only Grass and Fairy types, and being resisted by Ground, Rock, Ghost, and other poison types, on top of being ineffective against Steel types. Poison was the most common type in Generation 1, with 33 Pokemon. This also makes it the most abundant type added in a single generation. This total was just above Water types in Generation 1, which received one less. Arbok has 3 abilities. Its 2 baseline abilities are Intimidate and Shed Skin, and its hidden ability is Unnerve. Intimidate lowers the opponent's attack when you switch in, and is often considered one of the best abilities in the game for its utility against physical attackers. Shed Skin has a 1 in 3 chance to cure non-volatile status conditions at the end of each turn, allowing Arbok to cure its own sleep, paralysis, freeze, and burn. This ability would be great on a bulky Pokemon that can set up to sweep so that it can shrug off Burn's attack debuff or the speed debuff of paralysis. Unnerve prevents foes from eating their berries, which is more useful in Little Cup where berries are more prevalent. Now, let's move on to Arbok's stat distribution. If we consider that mythical Pokemon have 100 points in each of their base stats, we can assume anything greater than 100 is great. So 90 to 100 is a good stat, 80 to 90 is a decent stat, 70 to 80 is okay, 60 to 70 is poor, and anything below 60 is bad. Like its contemporaries, many of Arbok's stats are less than decent. Its attack is quite good, but nothing to write home about. Again, when comparing Arbok's stats to its Pokedex entries that describe it as terrifically strong and able to chase its prey to the ends of the earth, it's almost as if we're looking at 2 different Pokemon. This contrast is even more apparent when looking at Arbok's typical moveset. When it comes to the base power of moves, we can use the same scale we use for stats. For its most exclusive move, Arbok has access to Coil, which is a status move that raises attack, defense, and accuracy by 1 stage. Its stab move, Gunk Shot, is a 120 base power physical poison type move that has a 30% chance to poison the target. This move also has 80% accuracy, so when coupled with Coil, this move will gain the accuracy it needs, plus some extra physical damage. This combo is extremely potent, but crippled by Arbok's lower speed tier. For coverage, Arbok also has access to Earthquake, a 100 base power physical ground type move which is super effective against Rock, Steel, and Poison, which are types that resist poison type moves. Its last move, Sucker Punch, is a 70 base power physical dark type move that will deal damage and have increased priority if the opponent uses an attacking move. This is great because it can be powered up with Coil, deal super effective damage against Ghost type Pokemon, and deal damage before the opponent to make up for its lack of speed. While Arbok's moveset is actually not bad, it's not very characteristic of Arbok. In its gameplay, it buffs its stats and strikes with great power, whereas the Pokedex entries state that it suppresses foes. While Arbok does have access to moves that fit this description like Wrap and Glare, these moves are not currently viable, so it must resort to brute force just to end up as a low-tier Pokemon. While its Intimidate ability and Poison typing are actually quite good, we can push Arbok to a higher tier by giving it ample stats and reworking the moves that are more characteristic of Arbok. Therefore, if we were to make Arbok better, it would need an evolution, which I will refer to as Adnocana. First, let's rework its stats. Like we mentioned before, Arbok needs quite a few stat points to come close to the average overused Pokemon, but I think it will need around 82 points to see major improvements and be able to compete with the higher tier Pokemon. This would put Adnocana at 530, which is lower than the average overused Pokemon at 548 base stats. As for what stats will be boosted, it should receive a decent boost in its defensive stats, as well as a minimal upgrade to its offensive stats. This spread would allow Adnocana to remain as a powerhouse by setting up with Coil and allow it to tank more hits. While I don't really think Arbok needs much more than this stat boost to elevate its current kit, I did want to modernize some of its older moves to make this Pokemon better reflect its original concept. First, I would like to discuss Wrap. Back in Generation 1, partially trapping moves were much more mechanically dense. In short, Wrap, Bind, and Fire Spin would still trap and damage the target for 2 to 5 turns, but they would also lock the user into that move and prevent the target from moving if they were slower than the user. This move was exceptionally annoying when fighting Erica, whose Victory Bell would use a combination of Poison Powder and Wrap to whittle down your health bar while barring both players from actions. Ekans and Arbok's learn sets hint at a similar strategy by providing moves that apply poison, partially trapping moves, and flinching moves. Unfortunately, partially trapping moves were nerfed in Generation 2 and have been long forgotten. However, there are some Pokemon used today that still use crowd control to their benefit. For example, Togedemaru uses Nuzzle to paralyze its enemies and follows it up with stab moves like Iron Head or Zing Zap that may make its target flinch. Since Paralyze has a 1 in 4 chance to stun, and those other moves have a 30% chance to flinch, Togedemaru can use this setup to prevent its opponent from attacking 47.5% of the time. When applying this strategy to Adnocana, I believe Wrap should also have a 20% chance to CC the target. When combined with some of Arbok's other moves, we can come up with a couple of sets that accomplish different goals. One set would use Ekans and Arbok's old signature move Glare to paralyze the opponent. This would allow the opponent to attack 75% of the time. It would then use Wrap to trap and deal damage over time, while only allowing the opponent to attack 80% of the time. Lastly, it would follow up with flinch moves like Bite to deal additional damage and only allow the opponent to attack 70% of the time. Combining all of these factors together, a fully CC'd opponent would only be allowed to attack 42% of the time. This would certainly reflect Arbok's original concept of binding and suppressing its prey. Another set would use Toxic to ramp up damage at the end of each turn. Adnocana would then Wrap to trap and deal damage over time and only allow the opponent to move 80% of the time. It would apply additional pressure with a flinch move like Bite to allow the opponent to move 70% of the time unless the enemy moves first. In a perfect scenario, Adnocana would prevent the opponent from moving 44% of the time while dealing trap and toxic damage. Here, Adnocana would be a bulky crowd controller and toxic staller hybrid, which would be more characteristic of its poison type. If I were to change anything else about this Pokemon to make it even better, first, I would add a poison variant of Bite for a stab move. This would allow Adnocana to hit the types that would resist Bite. Dark and Fighting would take neutral damage, and Fairy would take super effective damage. Second, I would add the Dark type to make Bite a second stab move. This would also give Adnocana a psychic immunity in exchange for its resistances to Fairy, Fighting, and Bug, so this change might not be worth it. Lastly, I would modify Arbok's hidden ability. I would replace its hidden ability with Strongjaw to give those Bite moves a nice 50% boost in damage. So, what do you think? Do you have any ideas or regional variants or moves for Arbok? Let me know in the comments below, and please like and subscribe for more.